Hello and welcome to another episode of The Gain Line. My name is Matt Southcombe and I'm delighted to be joined by our rugby writers Simon Thomas with me in Cardiff and Ben James out in Cape Town with the Lions. Good morning, chaps. How are we doing?
Well, we're a lot hotter here than Ben is in Cape Town by the sound of it. He's chosen the perfect time to, just as we're scorching here. Now it's the turn of the Lions to show if they can scorch the Springboks.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one more bit of housekeeping before we get into it. This chat will be available in podcast form later on today. If you want to take us on the move with you, just search for the Welsh Rugby Podcast wherever you get your podcasts and we'll be there. Right, let's jump straight in. Ben, the Lions have just named their team for the first test. There it is going across the bottom of your screen. I suppose the first place to start really is with Alun Wyn Jones. We'll face the Springboks in the first test and captain the side 4 weeks after dislocating his shoulder against Japan.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely ridiculous comeback, isn't it? And you sensed, well, any other player, you feel this wouldn't have happened, but, Alun Wyn sort of continues to defy what scientists expect from a human being. He's just an absolute machine, and I think technically this will be his 10th test cap for the Lions. It could well be 11th. I don't know if the Japan game is going to get retrospectively capped, but 10th, that's the first player in the professional era to reach that milestone. I think Graham Price got about 13. Am I right, Simon?
Price, 3 tests in a row, incredible. But I mean, those two now do really stand right up there with the likes of Willie John McBride. Really, Lions, cons. I think the phrase would be.
Absolutely, and I think we'd had these whispers all throughout the tour that Alun Wyn was potentially coming back and he was recovering well. And I think as soon as we got those whispers, it was obvious that he was going to come back. And once he'd come back on last week, off the bench against the Stormers, then it became pretty obvious he was going to be in this test team. Stuart Hogg was speaking about him yesterday and about what a boost it was to have in camp, and quite interestingly about how Hogg was the captain on Saturday against the Stormers, and how Alun Wyn was sort of very happy to let Hogg sort of run the ship, and he'd come up to him with points, but he wouldn't put his message across. He wanted Hogg to do that himself. So I think for the Lions players, Stuart Hogg admitted he was delighted when he first saw Alun Wyn sort of step back into camp, because he'd heard bits and pieces, but they weren't fully expecting it. So it's a massive boost for the Lions.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a few comments coming in. Stuart Morris, saying Alun Wyn Jones, 10th Lions cap, what an achievement. Sarah Pretty saying legend, pure and simply. Jonathan Davis, not sure if it's the Jonathan Davis, but the ultimate player, a Welsh legend.
Which one?
Yeah, true. Keep your comments coming in, guys, and send in any questions that you have got, and we'll keep reacting to them. Si, I just want to bring you in on the Alun Wyn Jones stuff as well. Obviously he hasn't had a lot of game time in the last few weeks. Has just been rehabbing. There aren't many players I can think of that Warren Gatland would afford so much time to. But what do you think it says about Alun Wyn and perhaps his relationship with Warren Gatland that they've given him this opportunity?
Well, I mean, this was the plan, wasn't it? He was going, April, May, June. He was going to be the Lions test captain in the first test. So, and obviously what happened. But provided that they were convinced and happy in their own mind after sort of getting the reports back from Wales where he was training following his dislocated shoulder, they'd have had all the medical updates, all the rehab, then they'd have seen him in person when we arrived, then they saw him on the pitch, in the last game when he came on as a sub. At the end of the day, they've watched him and they've made a decision, he's ready to go. How long he'll have, maybe not as long as he would have if he'd have had a more game time under his belt. You might see him get 50 minutes or so. But just as an inspirational totemic leader, it makes absolute sense. He's still an absolute workhorse. And I guess you do have to say that, again, they lost on tour against South Africa. There were some question marks over the captaincy decisions there. The man who's given the role in his place, Conor Murray. A few questions raised over the decision-making when the Lions were up against 13 men. So it's going to be crucial. There's a relatively inexperienced referee in the 37-year-old Australian Nick Berry. he's a strong referee, but having an experienced captain is always vitally important, particularly in that situation. And he's going to have a big role to play in setting the standards in the opening few minutes. And because Gatland has not the opening half really, Gatland has talked in his press release today about how they was too slow to get up and running against South Africa. They'll be looking for a big dynamic start, and Alun Wyn will be at the forefront of that.
Yeah, touching on that captaincy thing, I think obviously the Lions will be delighted that Alun Wyn's back, but I don't think they'll be too disheartened with how things went against South Africa in the captaincy stakes. I think it's a lot easier to say it after you've lost, and it sounds a bit like excuses, but I think a lot of the decisions they made that night were sort of holding things back for the Test series. I don't think if we get to a similar position on Saturday or a week Saturday or 2 weeks Saturday, that the Lions are going to be tapping and going for about 5-10 minutes and consistently doing that. I think they were deliberately sort of holding back line-out moves and scrum moves and even a little bit of their attacking game plan. I think they played a quite sort of simplified game plan against the Box A team. So I don't think they'll be sort of losing too much sleep over that.
The bit we'll never know is what Alun Wyn would have done. Would he have stuck to because obviously it was the plan, wasn't it? We're going to do this tonight, and would he have got upon? I've had enough of this. Would he have just said, "Right, screw up"? We don't know, do we? But yeah, I think there's a lot kept in reserve, and it's just fascinating for me to see how this team. I had a few thoughts on the team actually. First thing I would say is hats off to Alex Lowe of the Times, one of our sort of rivals, but also colleagues. Reported the team last night. However he got in, we don't know. Absolutely spot on with the starting 15. I've had a few people come on to me. You might have views on this point. Why do you do this as journalists? Why do you give the team out early? Why do you give the opposition the news? Well, there's various things. I mean, ultimately, it might not be everybody's cup of tea, and it might not be a job for everyone, but it is a big part of the job. I've been doing this in a long time, and there's always been pressure to try and get the team. And why? Well, because the public are interested. I noticed when we reported last night on what the Times were reporting, it was the most read piece on our website, Ben, that you wrote up. So there is a market, there's an appetite for it. And, if you find out that information, you're going to report it. And fair play, you got it spot on. The only change is on the bench where Liam Williams is there rather than Ian Henderson, which kind of makes more sense, One wonders whether the fact that South Africa ditched the bomb squad, the 6-2 split on the bench, and went to a more traditional 5-3 for COVID-related reasons, has that maybe seen a change of the Lions? We don't know. We don't know whether Liam was there all along. And I guess Liam did have the knock last week, so perhaps they were waiting to see on that. But in general on the team, as for what I think of it, well, I suppose the surprise is anyone should be surprised, really, because it's hardly the first time in his coaching career that Warren Gatland has gone for size, power, and physicality. And if you're ever going to do that, you're probably going to do that against the Springboks. In his comments on the press release with the team, he talks about it being an arm wrestle. He talks about the need to front up physically, especially in the opening half. And he's picked the team to do that. He's gone for big men. He's gone for, no Toby Faletau, but he's gone for Jack Conan, a big, dynamic, close quarter ball carrier. He's gone for Courtney Laws at 6 rather than Tyke Byrne. Courtney Laws, hugely sort of dominant in the tackle, abrasive, big physical man. And of course, on the wing, he's gone for Dylan van der Merwe rather than Josh Adams. And again, power. You go back to what Gatland did a number of times consistently in his time in Wales. We had big men on the wing, didn't he? In George North and Alice Cuthbert. So it's just gone for size, really. Hasn't gone for a playmaking 12 in Farrell's gone for a big, strong carrier in Henshaw. Big men, big men. And of course, the debate is when you play the Boks, do you try and match them physically or do you try and get round them? He's going to try and front up physically, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're getting lots of comments coming in about the selection or non-selection of Josh Adams, and Size jumped the gun a little bit there, but I was going to come to that next. James Copley asking, are you guys surprised by the omissions of Josh Adams and Taulupe Faletau? If we start with Adams first, Ben, I mean, my gut reaction to this is that there's an injury, or there is, I have no information on this, but, his partner gave birth last week and he wasn't there for it. What sort of frame of mind is he in? Maybe he's not quite there. I think that's an outrageous decision if it's just a selection decision. I want to know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can sort of read into these things. His partner gave birth last Wednesday night, sort of during the South Africa A game. So he pulled out of that game. Then he played against the Stormers 3 days later. Didn't have his best game by his standards. The only game on this tour that he's not scored in. Spoke afterwards about how it was quite an emotional experience. He did take a bit of a knock as well, but the Lions haven't really said anything about that. So there's a couple of things there that you could look at as being reasons for why he's not in this team. Maybe he has found it sort of quite tough in the last week. Being so far apart from his partner, or maybe he has taken a knock and that was worse than previously thought. But Simon mentioned it there, and it's about big men. And if you look at the balance of this team, the Lions were never going to have a big ball carrier at 8. So that was one thing they were always missing out on. They were missing out on potentially big ball carriers in the packs. Then it's about how you go around doing that. And we know with Gatland, he likes to do that with big wingers and big centres. We got Henshaw in midfield. And Duan van der Merwe, I think to him is just... He's something of a temptation for Gatland that I don't think he can resist, because he's big, he's explosive, he's got that X factor going forward. I think he's going to get tested severely defensively against Cheslin Colby or Mapimpi, whoever he lines up against. And that's why I'm really surprised that Adams isn't in. Not because of his try-scoring record, which we know is fantastic, not because of what he does going forward, but because out of the 4 wingers in this squad, I think he's the best defensively. I think he reads the game really well. He can play fullback, so he's got a really good knack of reading backlines and where to step in. And I think that's why I'm surprised, because I don't think we're going to, there's not going to be too many opportunities in these test matches. It's about being solid. The word patience being used so much. It's about matching the box physically to begin with, and then being patient and waiting for these opportunities to come. And if you're talking about someone who can sort of do that, be patient, be solid, and then take the opportunities, well, it's Josh Adams.
You have to say it's been one heck of a roller coaster ride for Josh Adams in 2021. I mean, you think back on it, suspended at the start of the Six Nations following that, breaching the COVID regulations in terms of the gender reveal party. Then is recalled, gets back on his try-scoring run, carries that form on when he's played for Cardiff, hits the ground running against Japan, carries on in South Africa. The tries just keep on coming. Then he has the emotional sort of being involved by the kind of Zoom call, I guess, the birth of his first child. And then he has this to deal with. I mean, he's gone through the full gamut and range of emotions, hasn't he? And it is an interesting one. I mean, we can only go on what we're told by the Lions. And Neil Jenkins was up yesterday, and he said that the only player unavailable through injury is Finn Russell. So we have to, from that, just, take the view that both Adams and Seif Aletau are selection decisions. And again, that then brings you back to size, doesn't it? I mean, Ben mentioned the defensive fragility. Scottish fans get quite animated when you suggest this, because it's almost become the go-to thing to say about Van der Merwe, isn't it? Is there a defensive issue? I mean, if we think back to the Six Nations, there were a couple of times where his size and his turning arc made him a little bit vulnerable. You think of Rhys Sammett's try up in Scotland, where he wasn't able to get back and deal with that situation. And there have been a few occasions, but, has he actually missed that many tackles on this tour? It'd be interesting to see the stats, maybe compared to other people. But what you do know is as Ben rightly says, he can come in and he will take contacts and he will break through people. What I would, not as much as the defensive issue, the one thing I would wonder is, how good is he under the high ball? The one thing about South Africa from the World Cup is Faf de Klerk is going to send a series of bombs up in the air. And Josh Adams has shown, perhaps particularly on an offensive point of view, he's very good under the high ball. Is Van der Merwe strong that area? Is he going to be able to deal with the quick feet of Colby being a big frame? These are the big tests. I mean, I don't think there's any question about when he gets the ball, Van der Merwe, he can do damage. Of course, the whole issue will be, how is he going to cope on the other side of the ball?
Yeah, as we're on air, I'm just hearing some live messages. That is a selection decision. The Josh Adams one, there's no injury there. Just one of those calls that Gatland has had to make. Perhaps not something that I would have gone for, but as you've touched on, Si, it's not the first time Warren Gatland has done this, and invariably he gets them right. Adams apparently was one of the first to go up to the winger selected and offer his support, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest, given the kind of character he is. But that's it. There's no injury, just a selection decision that Josh Adams is not involved on Saturday. So those are the decisions Warren Gatland gets paid the big bucks to make, and we'll see how it works out. Moving on slightly, the other surprising decision, perhaps not as much. I don't mean to be harsh here, but I'm not sure the form has quite been there on this tour for Faletau. But he's been a bit of a safety blanket over the years, particularly in Warren Gatland's sides, and we know the quality that he possesses. Got a comment in from Alun Wyn Jones here. Do you think selecting Conan over Faletau shows a lot of faith that the Lions will have in the dominant scrum? Faletau is so good when the scrum is not quite as steady. I mean, over the years, we've seen Faletau work, quite frankly, miracles at the back of retreating Welsh scrums at times. What do we make of that decision, Ben?
I thought it was a comment from Alun Wyn Jones. That was a bit of a scoop.
Yeah, not quite that big of an exclusive.
That's a very good question. That actually, it's something that's not really been thought about. But I think the Lions will be confident that at the very least they can get parity. You look back to that Box A game last week, and I think that was one of the things that would have really pleased them was how the scrum went. Obviously, the prop combinations we're seeing on Saturday haven't played together on this tour, which is always nice, as most of the combinations in this test team haven't played together on this tour. But I think they'll be all right on that front. But in terms of Conan ahead of Faletau, yeah, it's not as much of a surprise because I think Jack Conan's he's been the form number 8 of this tour, and with the number 8, it's very much not a muchness of a muchness, but you're not really sort of with Adams and Van der Merwe, you're very much going with one style of player to another. I think the number 8 in the squad, they've all been picked to do a certain job, and that's why Vunipola and CJ Stander were overlooked to begin with. It's very dynamic, sort of ball carrying edge forwards these are going to be the guys who are going to move the point of attack and who are going to try and move this box pack around and beat them that way. And I think Faletau on his day would be the guy to do that. And it's always a surprise not to see that faith repaid in Faletau simply because of what he's done. But, it's very hard to overlook Jack Conan for what he's done. I'm a little surprised that maybe Faletau or even Sam Simmons haven't been looked at as a bench option. Obviously, it changes now. They've gone to a 5-3, but that's something the Lions have had sort of found a lot of success with in the last couple of weeks, is going for a 6-2 split, 2 back rowers, and then as the match goes on, sort of bringing those on to continually move the point of attack. A lot of tip-on passes, a lot of playing it with a fair bit of width off fly half, a pod of 3, very wide, reloading quickly, going again, move the sort of the box pack around and don't let their backs reload. That's going to be crucial. And so, yeah, I'm a little surprised that there's no option like that on the bench other than Tyg Byrne. But yeah, you can't complain too much if you're Toby Faletau.
You would guess, Ben, would you, that maybe Curry is the man who would move to number 8 if there was a requirement to go in that direction?
Yeah, I think so.
For England, isn't it, for sale?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock you if Courtney Laws is there to do a sort of job, 60 minutes, just batter anything in green, and then Tyg Byrne comes on at 6, maybe. Depending on how Curry and Conan are, then you can make the call on Hamish who he comes on for, and you sort of open it up.
Well, the other thing, as we said earlier, Alun Wyn's probably the last 55, 60 maximum you might have thought. So you could either have Laws or Byrne then going into the second row, couldn't you, as that option? I mean, with Conan, it's interesting. I mean, if you'd have said in April, May time that Jack Conan was going to start the first test, you'd have got pretty good odds on that, wouldn't you? But I mean, we've seen a lot of him here in Wales, as playing the Pro 14, and he is a consistent player, and he does bring a real dynamic edge as a carrier. Dynamism is the word Ben used. I used it as well, and it is the key word. And it's a word that we thought perhaps Sam Simmons was going to deliver, because that's kind of his explosiveness. But I think perhaps, Conan is slightly more of a kind of, disciplined player in terms of around the area he plays. Is a physical player who will take the ball forward. The other thing is, I think he is very much a liner option, and this team is, with Alun Wyn going to the second row, if you look at the options, you've got a variety of lineup options now, because you've got, obviously, Courtney Laws can offer you that. Conan will do so as well. Itoje, obviously, fine athlete. Alun Wyn Jones, I think that's going to be important. It's interesting with Conan as well, because he is somebody who will put a huge defensive shift in, real workhorse in that area. And if you look at the selection of Laws, Alun Wyn Jones as well has always been a defensive animal. Itoje, I think there's a realization, isn't there, that when the box do come, they're going to come hard physically. So there's men for that job. The other thing that Ben touched on there, which is interesting for me, is the front row battle. It's an interesting call that Nieba, the new Springboks coach, has gone for. He's kept in reserve what some might see as the strongest front row, all on the bench. Stephen Kitchoff, Malcolm Marks, Frans Malherbe, mighty front row to come on maybe after 55, 60 minutes. Arguably, the two weaker props are starting in Oke and Trevor Nakani. I would imagine that the Lions, having gone, with the two strongest scrummages, probably. I mean, Wyn Jones has a great tour, deserves his place. We all know, but Furlong's test caliber. You would certainly think, with Gatland talking about wanting a good start as opposed to the South Africa A game, that's going to be a big area they're going to target. And it's an area where the refereeing of Nick Berry will be absolutely crucial.
Just want to come in with a bit of breaking news. Owen's been back on. Apparently, his dad is called Alun Wyn Jones. and apparently, they get very disappointed when he turns up to hotel bookings. And if that is true, I would be trying to use that to my advantage if I was Dad Owen. Fair enough. Ploughing on then, I know we've touched a lot on the Welsh omissions and selections in this side, as we naturally would. Let's take a bit of a wider look at the team that's been picked then. What are the eye-catching selections in here for you, Ben?
I think Ali Price at 9 is something. I made a bit of a mistake. I called it a shock on Twitter. So I've risked the ire of Scottish Twitter. It's a shock in the sense that I thought Price deserved to start at 9, but I didn't see Gatland going for it. I think all the travelling pack of journalists out there think that Ali Price has probably been the best of the bunch at scrum half. I don't think Conor Murray's really been anywhere near his best. I don't think Gareth Davis has done himself any favours too with his one start that he had. He didn't really push his case. So I think it's been tough on that. But Ali Price the other night against the Stormers, I think he took a little while to get going. But when he did get going, his delay of passing and his speed of delivery just really brings forwards onto the gain line well, and it sort of stops the defence sort of reading things and biting onto things. And against the box, that's crucial, because if you can manipulate where the box are going to tackle and when they're going to tackle, well, that's massive, because if you don't, then they've got the physicality to knock you back. So that's crucial in how they're going to play. The other thing, I think someone's just made a comment about it, is Hogg at 15. Obviously, this is his third Lions tour, and it's basically 8 years of hurt over for him now. 4 years ago, he was ruled out with a tour when he was arguably the form man, with an early injury, took an elbow to his eye, Conor Murray's elbow, I think. 4 years before that, 2013, was just a little bit too soon for him in Australia. But yeah, for him to get a start at 15 now, he's spoken really candidly on this tour about how much it means, probably more candidly than he's ever really spoken about it, about how the last 4 years have been quite tough, and he's probably gone to places he didn't expect to, and he's pushed himself to get back here, which we don't tend to see from rugby players often. It can be quite sort of media managed. So when you see these guys really sort of speaking quite candidly about their experiences of chasing this jersey, it reminds you exactly what this tour means. And the same goes for Dan Biggar. He was here 4 years ago, missed out on test selection despite an outstanding tour in New Zealand, and it's a fantastic thing for him, especially the last month or so he's had losing his mother just before tour. It's fantastic that he gets a deserved test start.
It's an interesting one, fullback. I mean, the first thing to say is Liam and Hogg, they're both quality players, aren't they? Top quality international players. I guess it depends what you're looking for from your fullback, doesn't it? I mean, there was a big debate in the last Lions tour. kind of a lot of people thought Lee Halfpenny would be the starting 15, and he went for Liam Williams, which was a bit of a shock. And then Liam obviously sort of stayed there for the test series. As I said earlier, we know there's going to be a lot of bombs being launched, and a lot of them are going to be in the direction of the fullback, or ones that the fullback will look to deal with. So who was the better aerial game out of the two? Possibly you'd argue Liam Williams marginally. Very solid in that area, isn't he? Then I guess the question is, once the ball has been received by the fullback, what are you looking to do next? Are you looking to take contact? Are you looking to break into open space? Are you looking to kick? Now, Liam's a fine counter-attacker, but in terms of yardage made on the return, there ain't many better in world rugby than Stuart Hogg. So it'll be very interesting for me to see what license he has got to do what he can do best, which is to take on defences in open field. Because he does consistently. You look at his record for Scotland, you're talking close on 100 metres made, a lot of games. And that is a big, big factor. You can sort of bring the ball from the back and get in front of your forwards. It makes a heck of a difference. And yeah, Hogg has been a fantastic international player. He's waited his time and his chance has come. As much as we'd love to see Liam play, part of me does feel glad for Hogg because he's had a long wait and he's a quality player. How many times was it? Twice or three times Six Nations Player of the Year? You're talking top quality here. And he will add a lot. And then you've got Liam on the bench as another option as well. It's a nice option because you've also got Elliot Daly, isn't he, who can swap around in the back division if need be. So they're well covered there. If they can get the ball.
Yeah, I just want to move things along because I'm conscious the time is rumbling on. You touched on it briefly there, Ben, the Conor Murray one. Obviously, there was a lot made of this in the Irish press when he was made tour captain in Alun Wyn Jones' absence. To be honest, I felt like when we saw him against Japan, I didn't think it was his best game, and I kind of felt like he needed to have some big games on tour to really cement his place in the starting side, and that never really came. So, like as you touched on, I guess it's not too much shock that he's not starting.
No, I don't think so. I think the only thing that sort of was maybe keeping him in contention for starting is the fact that if you look at Ali Price, you look at Gareth Davis, they're very sort of mercurial. Probably does them a disservice, but they're sort of sniping around the fringes, very live wire scrum halves. Conor Murray's a bit more seasoned, a bit more experienced. He's got he did have an excellent box kicking game. It's not quite been at its best on this tour, but he's sort of the elder statesman who can put his foot on the ball, so to speak, and take control of the game. But we haven't really seen that, and I think that's the biggest shame, is because I think a large part of what Gatland would have wanted would have been to have that control from Conor Murray in this test series, to have the box kicking so we can take the pace off the game and we can box kick to the spring box and basically play a sort of version of the game they play, which is, you kick to compete, you force the errors, and you gain the territory. But we just haven't seen that. I think, it's just not happened for Conor on tour. He's tried to sort of bring back the snipe into his game that we saw when he was at his best, 2018 when they beat the All Blacks. But yeah, it's just not happened for him. So it is cruel. It's a bit like seeing an English batsman sort of their runs dry up when they're handed the captaincy, which tends to happen quite a lot. But it's a massive chance for Ali Price to sort of show what he's worth.
I mean, again, for me, it comes back to dynamism, that key word. If you look at it, Price will just bring that extra bit of zip, slightly quicker. You look at Luke Cowan-Dickey, dynamic ball carrier. You look at Curry, dynamic ball carrier. We talked about Conan already. It's doing things quickly and getting across the gain line, perhaps with pace as much as power. We talked about this being a power-orientated team, but I think they will look to do things quickly as well. And Price does bring that extra zip and probably that extra yard of pace to the back line.
So I just want to come in a sec, Ben, and just because a lot has been talked about the style of play, and Murray is seen as a more pragmatic approach and would have box kicked, and it may have been a case of the Lions playing the Springboks at their own game, which is often thought of as probably not the right thing to do. If you cast your mind back to the World Cup, that's pretty much what Wales did. They kept it an arm wrestle, and they got to within 30 seconds of going into extra time and potentially beating the Springboks. They got a hell of a lot closer than England did in the final, when England perhaps didn't try to beat them at their own game and tried to play this kind of style where they put a bit more pace on it and a bit more width. They just got swallowed up. So is there something to be said here for perhaps pragmatism being the more favoured approach?
I was just going to the one point about that England World Cup final match. I mean, ultimately, England lost that because of the scrum. I mean, their foundation was taken away. They lost Sinclair early, didn't they, to concussion, and the scrum imploded, so they had no platform. So I think any kind of direction of travel they had planned for that game went out the window. It was fascinating watching the documentary about the Springboks and the whole World Cup experience, and Rassie Erasmus, who was the coach of the Springboks at the time, before the semi-final against Wales, kind of almost at the last minute changed his plans. He was going to try and play a wide open spaces channels game and decided, no, we'll take on Wales up front. It was almost like, because Wales were pretty clearly going to do that, and it was kind of almost a machismo thing of the Boks had to take them on. So both sides got drawn into it, and it was very, very tight. So it goes back to what I said right at the start. When you play the Boks, what's the best approach? Do you take them on in the arm wrestle? Do you match them there and try and get on top of them? Or do you look for parity there and try and beat them in other areas? Bottom line is they're not a very easy side to beat. We saw that in the World Cup. And then what happens is World Cup final, they're on top physically. They edge ahead. England are under pressure. Come the last 20 minutes, the razor strikes come out wide, don't they? Both, I think, Pimpy and Colby both score fine tries. So they've got that pragmatism, which can be then supplemented by the rapier edge and attack. They're a fine side. The unknown aspect, of course, is they haven't played a test match of quality, of significance since that World Cup final, have they? So it's fascinating. Who knows what's going to happen? I presume you're going to ask us for a prediction soon, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of choosing one way or the other. I think it's a case of mixing and matching. I think you've got to keep your variety. I think you've got to match the Boks physically. You've got to match them in the kicking game. The best way to break the Boks down is to kick behind them and to force them back. We saw New Zealand did it in the pool stage. Wales did it in the semi-final. England didn't really do it in the final. So I think that's going to be the thing. We've seen a lot of aimless kicking from the Lions on this tour, so that's something they're going to have to really tighten up. I think all three scrum halves haven't box kicked as well as they can. And then,
but that's not his strength, though, Ben, is it particularly?
No, but he does. Gatlin has spoke about him having a good, he's got a left-footed option as well. And we've got Daly there with a left-footed option, even though they didn't use him as well as they could have against South Africa. Obviously, Dan Biggar's one of the best in the world at sort of regathering his own kicks, and that's something that they'll do. And then when you get into those positions potentially where you can then sort of, you're in the attacking half, you can play with your things. That's when I think we'll see, it won't be wide rugby, but it'll be the way that the forwards are set out. It'll be stretching the box so that their backline can't sort of, the Boks like to blitz from out to in, so the winger comes up and makes the decisions where he's going to hit. So I think we'll see a lot of decoys and a lot of stuff like that to expose them. We've seen Wales do it in the past. I remember Liam Williams scored a lovely try where basically Anscombe came off the back of a scrum, and it's all that movement and motion from sort of wide. And I think that's what the Lions are going to have up their sleeve. A few tricks like that and a few sort of wide forward pods and tip-on passes just to keep the Boks forwards moving and to stop them from being so dominant in the tackle.
I think you're right to mention Biggar there. I go back to the World Cup game in 2015. It was his own regather of an up and under, which led to Gareth Davis's try. There's nobody better in world rugby at it. He brings lots of things, but that in particular, in terms of getting yourself 20, 30 yards forward and retaining possession, he could have an absolutely pivotal role to play there. Because I've seen in the past, Willie Relu, great player, not always the best in the air. Not always the best in the air, that's to be said.
All right, we'll keep things moving on. There is an interesting comment coming in here from Harley Worthy. Bench halfbacks look like they're there to shut the game out in the last 20 minutes, which kind of leads me on quite nicely to my next point. I want to talk about the Springboks slightly. And if we're talking about how the benches are going to be used, if Harley is right there and the Lions halfbacks are hoping to come on and close a game out, you look at the Springboks bench, and as Simon has alluded to, that front row is arguably stronger than the one that starts. So are we saying here that if the Lions are not in front by 50 minutes time, then something's gone wrong?
I mean, you would say that the Lions' back at front row is pretty decent as well.
Yeah.
I think, Sutherland's had a fine tour, isn't he? Vast experience in Ken Owens, Sinclair's dynamic. So I think the Lions will back themselves, but I think they certainly like to be in front. When I don't know what we call them now, not the bomb squad. It's the front row.
The replacements. They are. Sorry.
I meant particularly the front
finishers.
The beasts. Let's call them that. The beasts. When the beasts come on, the front row beasts come on. It's and it's interesting they haven't stuck with the 6-2 because that was so effective from in the World Cup, but they virtually changed the entire pack. Hence the bomb squad coming on. What the coaches said is because of the COVID situation where Pollard and Mpimpy have just come back from isolation. They didn't want to go with just the two backs on the bench. So it's kind of a forced situation there. But I think you will certainly see that front row maybe coming on masse, maybe 55 minutes, and it'll be a daunting sight to see. And the bench will play a massive, massive role. And I think it's a hard game to call. It really is.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, it's about time we get your predictions then, on that note, before we shoot off. What do we think then, Ben? Let's put our cards on the table. You've had long enough to look at them. What do you think is going to transpire on Saturday?
Do you know what? I genuinely haven't thought about a result once when I've been looking at these teams. I know we just talked about the bench and whether the Lions need to be ahead, but you look at that Box A game and South Africa wilted a fair bit because they're just so short game time. So I don't think the front row isn't exactly the sort of place where you're looking for fresh lungs. So I don't know how much that's going to sort of affect things. I think I can just see the Lions nicking this one. I think they'll be a bit more clinical than they were sort of last Wednesday night, and I think they'll just get out ahead sort of late on. As long as they're not sort of caught too cold, which shouldn't be the case like it was sort of in 2009.
All right, then. So what, are we saying you think the Lions are going to get the job done?
Yeah, say let's go 23-21 to the Lions.
Oh, okay. Si, what do you think?
Well, I've said it all along, 2-1 to the Springboks in the series overall. The world champions are a very good side. You could argue that if the Lions are to get one, well, you'd like to think they get more. That the first test is the one to go for. Find it very difficult, but I just think in terms of the overall strength of the box and the physicality, and then you do have a world-class man in Faf de Klerk at 9. You can see him bossing things. Pollard's a quality 10. Dale Ande, probably arguably the best 12 in the world. I just think that 9, 10, 12 on the back of a very strong pack might just edge it. So I'm going to go 25-20 to the Springboks.
Oh, okay, there we go.
What about yourself? What about yourself?
That's not in my remit, Ben. I'm just here to control the circus. No, if you want to push me, I would probably edge for the Lions. COVID, isolations, no game time. Well, severe lack of game time really for the Springboks in the last 2 years. I think we saw that they didn't finish particularly strongly in the South Africa A game. I know there's some different personnel now in this one, but I think that was a good hit out. I think the Lions will have benefited from that quite heavily to go into the first test well prepared. And like we've touched on, there probably are things that have been held back. And I think when they got into a rhythm, particularly in the first quarter of the second half, the Lions started to cause real problems. I know South Africa were men down at that point, but you just started to see them get into their attacking patterns a little bit and work. They would just come in deep just to get outside that blitz with a lot of pullback passes, and it worked quite effectively. So I think the Lions are probably better prepared for this match. Now, obviously, everything will go out the window when that whistle blows on Saturday afternoon. But I think if you wanted my cards on the table, I think that the Lions to edge it slightly. I think if they don't win on Saturday, it's very hard to see them coming back to win the series. And I don't think you could say the same for South Africa because I think they'll definitely get stronger as the series wears on. But I think the Lions probably have to win on Saturday to put themselves in a position to win overall. So there we have it. That's my views. That's Ben's views. That's Simon's views. That's it for the show today. Thanks for sending in all your comments. That was great fun. We got around as many as we could. Now, obviously, we've given our views. Warren Gatland is about to give his view on things at midday. And then, of course, it's full steam ahead to the first test, Lions versus the Springboks on Saturday. You'll be able to catch all of that right here on Wales Online.